Welcome to my channel. They told her she wasn't ready. They grounded her, mocked her, crossed her name off the roster in red ink. But when the sky turned hostile and every other pilot stood down, one call sign returned from legend, Valkyrie Six. This is the untold story of the pilot who shattered every barrier, rewrote the rules of the battlefield, and proved that discipline, not doubt, decides who owns the sky. They told me I was grounded, again. Weather forecast looked rough, and apparently that was enough of a reason to strike my name from the flight board. No exceptions, the warrant officer said as he slid the roster away from me like it was nothing. I didn't argue. I just tightened my gloves and looked out at the gray New Mexico sky. The others chuckled under their breath. I heard the muttered comments I'd long grown used to. Apaches are for men. They said it like a joke. I never laughed. I didn't need to. I stood there silent, jaw set, as the cold wind swept across Sandstone Army Airfield. The ops center was filled with the usual buzz until an urgent alarm ripped through the speakers, sharp and high. A convoy had been hit just east of the mountain pass. They needed air cover. Now, I stood straighter as a general walked in. My mouth moved before I could think. Valkyrie Six, ready. He froze. Only a half second. Then his posture changed. Recognition flickered in his eyes. The room fell into an unnatural hush. Even the officers who'd never seen me fly stopped whispering. My name is Isabel Mikhail, 31, American-born, Russian roots, naturalized by my mother's side. My flight patch read AH, 64E pilot, but that was a formality. What I mostly did was ferry logistics loads and run diagnostics. The phrase combat sortie was something my name hadn't been assigned to in almost a year. In every briefing, I heard the same remarks. Just keep the cockpit warm. Let the real pilots handle the engagement protocols. Hey, don't mess with the TDC system while I'm talking. Out on the line, I once heard, women should be flying Huey medevacs, not Apaches. I don't think they meant to say it that loudly. I didn't bother to correct them. Every time my name went up for combat rotation, it was neatly crossed out with red ink. Mission too volatile. Crosswinds too harsh. Icing risk. Better to send someone seasoned. Always an excuse. I took it all in silence. But I trained like I was already in the fight. I checked my helmet's bore sight alignment down to the micrometer. TDC panel? Labeled with high-vis tape. Laser code 2179. I kept my notes updated with burst timings, LMC drift compensations, and wind shear patterns between 2,500 and 3,000 feet. I traced arrow paths on my visor to track the winds even during descent. My pocket notepad, packed with grease pencil notes, my own SOPs for emergencies they didn't drill for. During a night gunnery drill last fall, a warrant officer leaned close and whispered, "Don't disengage the George autopilot. It'll do the work for you." I flicked George off without missing a beat and flew nap of the earth through ravines that made even the instructors squint at my telemetry afterward. When I landed, no one said a word. They didn't have to. I didn't talk back. I just flew. They never asked why I trained so precisely. Why I traced and retraced every inch of the battlefield maps. Why I ran simulation after simulation until I could react before the prompts even loaded. I carried a silver coin in my flight suit that read, "Steady hands, clean returns." On my wrist, a paracord band with 3 knots. Check. Decide. Commit. And inside the cover of my kneeboard, I kept a hand-stitched patch. Gray with a white Valkyrie helmet and one word below it, Valkyrie. Not an official insignia, but mine. I wasn't supposed to be anyone important. Not on paper. But every mechanic I flew with knew I found faults others missed. Hairline cracks in the torque mounts. Faint hydraulic trails they'd have missed under pressure. Calluses on my thumbs from endless hours gripping cyclic. Scars under my wrists from harness straps biting down on rough maneuvers. They said I wasn't ready. That I hadn't seen enough combat. What they didn't know was this. I had flown before. Real combat. Not logged. Not official. And once, deep in the Arauca Ridge zone, I held a corridor open for 7 minutes while a medevac pulled 6 wounded out of a kill zone no one else would enter. No backup. No air escort. Just me and hellfire. But I never said a word. It was always the same pattern. The mission board would go up, names shuffled and organized according to role, experience, and risk level. Mine would appear briefly, only to be crossed out with that same thick red slash. This time it was for a ranger escort sortie through Mesa K-17, a narrow gorge infamous for its wind shear and unpredictable microbursts, the kind of place veterans either dreaded or craved. 5 minutes before the briefing, I saw my name vanish again. Crosswinds and icing risks, they said. Better leave it to seasoned personnel. The warrant officer who replaced me tossed my helmet back onto my desk. Maybe next time, he muttered, without looking at me. Weather permitting. I stepped out into the cold, staring up at streaked cloud bands shredding across the eastern sky. The wind wasn't hostile. Not to someone who knew how to read it. Low scud clouds. Wind pushing 22 knots. Rotor wash would flatten smoke into a natural smokescreen. Visibility would drop for IR seekers. A perfect environment for someone trained to fight in chaos. I pulled out my kneeboard and scribbled quick notes. Low cover. Wind lane drift SE to NW. Ideal for terrain masking. Chief Ramirez leaned over my shoulder. He'd been working around choppers longer than I'd been alive. He gave a low whistle. You read that sky like a man who's flown 2 decades of combat, he said, not unkindly. I read it because no one else will, I replied. That night, our unit was gathered in the ready room for a rare screening. Flight footage from a mission 5 years back. Iron Mesa. The story every pilot heard in whispers, but had never seen. A single Apache had held off a full assault while a medevac bird extracted a downed team under fire. No one knew who the pilot was. The audio came through crackling with static, but the voice was unmistakably calm. Valkyrie 6 on station. 30 mic. Ripple fire. Stand clear. The room erupted in applause. Some stood. Others slapped each other's backs in awe. A few shouted, "That's the kind of pilot we need." I sat in the back row, silent. My fingers drummed lightly against my kneeboard. 10-tap rhythm. Burst fire timing. The exact cadence heard in the footage. Senior Chief Ramirez didn't miss it. His head tilted just slightly. I saw the way his gaze lingered on me. You fly like someone who's done it for real, he said later. Not just simulations. I didn't confirm. I didn't deny. I just rechecked the grease pencil marks on my TDC panel. The footage became legend again. Valkyrie 6 became an unofficial ghost story. No one could confirm who she was. No one ever took credit. The only truth anyone agreed on: whoever flew that mission was the best they'd ever seen. And still, I kept being crossed off the flight line. Weather, policy, protocol, always some excuse. I kept my gear clean, my kneeboard updated, and my anger quiet. Until the next morning. 0400 hours. Alarm red. Priority 1 alert. Ranger team had been ambushed at Mesa K-17, the exact spot I'd been pulled from the day before. Medevac units stood down, unable to proceed without air cover. Intel confirmed enemy manpads in the area. No safe way in. The duty officer barked over the intercom. Squadron 2, airborne. Squadron 3, remain grounded. Mikhail, you are ordered to stand down. I sat there, lacing my gloves. My jaw locked in quiet defiance. Then the base fell into a new kind of silence. A chopper touched down, unannounced. Blackhawk class. Out stepped Brigadier General Elias Monroe, former Task Force Dominion commander. Legend in his own right. He'd come for an inspection, not a fight. But as he passed the ops center, someone muttered, "She's better off pressing buttons on a sim panel." That's when I stood. Met his eyes. "Sir, Valkyrie 6. Ready for immediate launch." Everything stopped. General Monroe didn't blink. The second I said the call sign, I saw it. All of it, wash across his face. Memory, recognition, and then command. He straightened his spine like a man who'd just been reminded of a battlefield. Behind him, officers who had barely glanced at me were now standing at attention without even knowing why. The name Valkyrie 6 hadn't been spoken out loud on this base in years. It wasn't on any record. Not anymore. The general's voice cut like steel. Who ordered her grounded? The room froze. A warrant officer stepped forward, stammering, "Sir, weather limits. Protocol requires experience for missions like K-17. She's not rated for." She flew Iron Mesa alone. Through zero visibility, no backup, and brought everyone home. Monroe snapped, his voice low but deadly. "She is more than rated." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. My helmet bag was already slung over my shoulder. My kneeboard strapped tight. The TDC panel marked with 2179 tape. My gear didn't need adjusting. It had been ready since before the others even knew there would be an alert. The general barked, "She flies with me. Now." And just like that, everything changed. I slid into the front seat of the Apache, co-pilot/gunner position. Everything clicked into place like it always had. My body moved on instinct, not nerves. Foresight alignment, check. Laser code, confirmed. Visor, clean. LMC calibration, stable. Pilot Warrant Officer Noah Jensen dropped into the left seat. Younger, sharp. He glanced over once, then again, slightly slower. He could tell. "CPG, are you good?" he asked, almost cautious. I toggled the cannon. Gun up. 30 mic ready. LMC engaged. Hellfire's armed. He nodded. Copy that. George, the autopilot, stayed off. I flew manual. We lifted smoothly off the tarmac, blades slicing through the dawn haze. I felt the thump of the air as we climbed. The Apache didn't just respond. It obeyed. Crosswinds hit hard near Mesa K-17. Turbulence rolled over us like invisible fists. But I was already adjusting drift and counter inputs, reading the wind shifts in real time. I'd memorized this canyon long ago. I knew where the wind twisted, where thermal drafts would rise off the walls. Jensen followed my lead without protest. Contact ahead. 2 technicals, North Bank. Heaters confirmed. Got them, I said calmly, flipping to acquisition. Mapping Ripple 2. Rockets on ridge. Copy. Bank left, lining up. We swept into firing position. My crosshairs danced briefly, then locked. I let the KWS rockets fly in perfect twin bursts. The ridge erupted. Enemy fighters scattered. The medevac bird wasn't in sight yet. Too dangerous to approach. We had to clear the rest. I swept the TADS across the upper ledge and saw it. Thermal signature. Shoulder-fired launcher, hidden in shadow, waiting. Jensen. Mask on. 3, 2, 1. He rolled the bird. Brief exposure. Just enough. Firing. The Hellfire screamed from the rail, carving its line of fire clean. The target vanished in smoke. Back to cannon. I stitched a 10-round burst across the west bank. Shifted 2 meters. Another burst. Just like Iron Mesa. Just like before. Dust-off 6 inbound. Came the call. Archer holds cover. I replied automatically before catching myself. That old name again. It wasn't mine anymore. But Jensen chuckled. You were Valkyrie 6 back then, right? I didn't answer. The dust swirled in waves around the landing zone as we painted the sky with fire and smoke, masking their approach. The medevac bird settled. Loaded. Lifted. No casualties. No hits. No delay. Mission complete. I switched back to wide scan, checked our retreat route. Winchester on rockets. 310 rounds left. We're clear. Roger, Jensen said, his voice quieter now. More reverent. As we flew low through the canyons, heading home, the radio flared. Unknown support. Confirm your identity. Jensen keyed in with a grin. Valkyrie 6 is back. The moment we touched down, the world didn't resume the way it should have. Our rotors were still winding down when General Monroe stepped directly in front of the cockpit and gave a formal salute. Not just to me, but through the glass, a public gesture before the entire operations center. His eyes said what the others hadn't dared admit yet. I climbed out of the aircraft, peeled off my helmet, and tucked the 2179 mark tape back onto the TDC panel. A habit, a ritual. To me, the mission was done. Not some triumph. Just duty. What followed was out of my hands. Monroe turned toward the silent operations room, where flight officers, warrant ranks, and base staff stood like they'd seen a ghost. Anyone who ever struck her name from combat duty, he said, voice sharp as the edge of a blade, stand up. Now. No one moved. No one dared. You could feel the weight of the moment, heavier than all the hardware in the hangars. The ones who used to laugh, they looked away. The ones who used to dismiss me, they studied the floor. And the quiet? It said everything. No speeches. No angry confrontations. Just silence and truth. I returned to the ready room and quietly folded my gear. The helmet, the kneeboard, the patch with the Valkyrie insignia, all of it. Back in place. One mission didn't undo years of being sidelined. But it didn't need to. Because now, the myth had a face. By morning, a sheet of paper appeared on the squadron board. No signature. No origin. But the words were burned into every pilot's mind by nightfall. The Blade 10 Doctrine. Fly silent 10 before you speak. Wind decides your fate, not pride. Nap of Earth isn't reckless, it's discipline in terrain. Mask/unmasked by rhythm, not by ego. Burst 10. Shift 2. Brief. LMC first, trigger second. Let the laser tell you the truth. Always cover first. Return alive. It wasn't doctrine in any manual, but it spread across units like gospel. Pilots began taping reminders inside their helmets. Crew chiefs etched notes into their consoles. The flight line, once dominated by swagger and assumptions, became a place of quiet preparation. That was the real shift. Not who flew, but how they flew. And still, I didn't speak about Iron Mesa. I didn't call in favors. I didn't ask for rank, awards, or promotion. I just showed up early and prepped like I always had. But now they watch me differently. It didn't take long for the culture to shift. No new policy was signed. No all-hands memo went out. And yet, somehow, everything changed. You could see it in the way new pilots approached pre-flight. No more slouching over checklists or glancing past environmental data. They began inspecting the wind drift overlays, just like I had, drawing tiny arrows on their visors, marking their LMC codes by hand. The old joke stopped. No one called Apaches men's birds anymore. The mission after K-17 ran on pure merit. The board listed my name in black ink. Clean. No crossout. No explanation. Just Valkyrie 6 slotted for Overwatch duty near Glacier Pass. When I stepped up to brief, no one interrupted. No one tried to mansplain the TDC panel or correct my angle math. They just listened. Even the ground crews began asking questions. Crew Chief Hayes stopped me before takeoff and said, "Ma'am, would you mind showing me how you tune your boreside offset during wind shift?" It wasn't mockery. It was curiosity. Respect. I showed him. A young pilot, fresh out of school, found me in the hangar late one night while I was checking turret torque values. "Lieutenant," she asked quietly, "can you show me how to read terrain bounce off rotor wash?" She reminded me of myself. Tight posture, nervous but determined. I didn't hesitate. "Come here," I said, pointing to the monitor. "Watch the vibration echo. This pulse. That's tree line. That ripple. That's thermal bounce. Now adjust your fire path here." Word spread fast. They started calling it the Valkyrie method, but I never claimed the name. All I ever told them was, there's no shortcut to being good. Just repetition and care. That's it. But I could feel it. I wasn't an outsider anymore. The same men who once dismissed me started treating my checklists like gospel. The mechanics reviewed my flight footage to learn entry angles and masking rhythms. Even the simulator crews updated their training scripts with my burst fire timing. 10. Shift. Brief. Every once in a while, I'd catch someone whispering my old call sign like it was a spell. Valkyrie 6. I never confirmed it. Never denied it either. All I cared about was this. For the first time, pilots weren't being judged by their gender or their voice pitch. They were being measured by skill, experience, readiness, the things that should have mattered all along. Weeks passed, then months. I kept flying, mostly in silence. Not out of pride or aloofness, but because I had nothing left to prove. The only conversations I wanted were with the aircraft, the wind, and the terrain beneath us. That was enough. But something had shifted across the regiment. Training schedules changed. Combat rotations started listing names based on prior mission performance, not arbitrary assumptions. More women began appearing on high-risk flight duty. And not because anyone made a public push for diversity, because they were damn good, and finally, someone was watching for that. Instructors who once rolled their eyes now leaned forward when a young woman entered the simulator bay. They knew better. You could hear it in the chatter. "She flies like Valkyrie 6, someone would whisper after a crisp gunnery sim. And that meant something now. One evening, I was in the hangar after hours, doing what I always did, checking for things others missed. A flicker on a HUD feed. A micro delay in turret response. The kind of details that can kill if ignored. That's when Chief Ramirez approached again, this time without the quiet judgment he once carried. "I figured you were just obsessive," he admitted. "But those long checks of yours, they kept us alive out there. We all felt it." I didn't respond with words. I just nodded and went back to my checklist. There were no medals, no ceremonies, no camera crews waiting on the tarmac. And that was perfect. Because the work wasn't about validation. It was about the lives behind every call for air cover. The crew chiefs, the rangers, the medevac teams. The ones who never cared who you were, just that you showed up when it counted. I found a moment alone at the concrete barrier near the flight line. The one that caught spent 30mm casings when we did gunnery runs. Someone, probably one of the young flyers, had carved into the side with a penknife. Respect the ones who fly beneath the noise. That line hit me harder than any speech ever could. Because I'd lived it. I was it. And now, without making a single announcement, my presence had made it safer for the next generation of pilots who didn't fit the mold. They wouldn't have to fight so hard just to be taken seriously. They'd still have to earn it, but at least they'd be seen. I never thought I'd become anyone's mentor. For most of my career, I was the ghost on the roster. The name people ignored, the presence people dismissed. But now, pilots came to me willingly, with notebooks and questions and raw determination. I never said no. I didn't give them shortcuts or pep talks. I taught what I knew. How to read the wind before the instruments catch it. How to feel when the aircraft is straining before the warnings light up. How to hear the language of a machine under stress. They started coming more often. A junior officer knocked on my door after his third failed gunnery pass. "Lieutenant Mikhail, can you walk me through how you adjust for turret lag when the winds are shifting cross-axis?" "Of course," I said. "Bring your helmet and a fresh notepad." One by one, I showed them how to anchor their fire with LMC first, how to breathe between bursts, how to make the TDC an extension of their eyes, not just a sensor. Some were women. Many weren't. But that didn't matter. They came because they wanted to learn, not because of who I was or wasn't. And that's when I knew things were really changing. One night, I found an anonymous message folded into the corner of my locker. It wasn't signed, just a single quote written on aviation paper. "You don't need to shout to break barriers. You just need to fly better than anyone thought possible." I kept that note, folded it behind my kneeboard insert, next to the patch with the Valkyrie helmet. There were still skeptics, of course. The military doesn't shed old habits overnight. But those voices were fewer now and quieter. Because every time someone raised doubts, there was footage, telemetry, mission outcomes. Results spoke louder than bias ever could. General Monroe kept his distance after that first day, but I knew he was watching. Once, during a rotation, he crossed my path near the fuel depot. "No medal will ever explain what you've done here," he said quietly. "But the culture shift? That's yours. That's your legacy." I didn't need a reply. The truth was enough. I thought the story might end there. Small victories, steady flights, slow change. But stories like mine don't fade quietly. Especially not when the sky tests you again. We got the alert at 0347 hours. A recon team pinned near Blackwater Gulch. Fog thick as soup. Radio traffic scrambled. Last known position only a grid coordinate and a desperate call for air cover. Most of the squadron was grounded. Visibility below minimums. Risk of icing. One bird had already turned back with telemetry interference. But I didn't hesitate. I walked into the ops center and said, "Valkyrie 6, requesting clearance." The duty officer blinked like I'd spoken a different language. "Ma'am, no one's going up in that. No radar lock. No thermal clearance. We'd lose you before you even reached the—" "Then I won't use radar," I said calmly. "I'll fly NOE. Manual nav terrain guide." General Monroe wasn't on base, but he didn't need to be. His directives were still in place. No one dared countermand them. 5 minutes later, I was strapped into the cockpit, flipping switches by feel alone. I knew this bird better than I knew most people. She responded to touch, not words. Pilot Jenkins climbed in with me. He'd requested me specifically. "You sure about this?" he asked, voice tight. "We're not late," I said, locking my visor in place. "We're right on time." We lifted off into mist so thick it swallowed the lights 200 feet off the deck. Every instinct had to be on point. No GPS. No eyes. Just flight rhythms, mapped terrain in my head, and a touch on the controls that had taken years to hone. "Thermal's blind," Jenkins reported. "Switch to passive IR," I said. "And listen, not just to the comms, to the wind." He didn't ask what I meant. He just followed. The gulch opened below us like a scar. No visuals, but I felt the terrain drop. Heard the echoes shift against the canopy. Wind pressed from the left, stronger than forecast. That meant the fog would be drifting east. I nudged the stick. adjusted throttle, slid through the invisible corridor. And then we heard it. Crackled radio. Weak but real. Contact, 3 injured, can't move. Hold position, I replied, toggling back to secure channel. Valkyrie 6 on station. I loosed a 30mm burst across the ridgeline. Not to hit, just to light the field and break the fog wall. Figures emerged. 5 Rangers, 2 carrying another. A medevac couldn't land blind, but we could hold the path open. Jenkins, mask on. LMC engage. Pattern ripple, 2 by 2. I'll draw the line. You hold the rear. Copy, he said. We laid down covering fire, precise and rhythmic. Burst 10. Shift 2. Brief. The fog lit orange with every ripple. The medevac bird dropped in seconds later, guided by our tracers and terrain mapping. It hovered for 12 seconds, just enough. Extraction complete. We peeled off westward, silent, low, skimming the fog like wraiths. When we returned, the ops center didn't speak. They just stood, because we had flown where no one else would, and brought everyone home. Again, after Blackwater Gulch, something subtle, but irreversible, shifted in the air around base. It wasn't just that we flew a mission others deemed impossible. It was how we did it. Clean. Silent. No heroics. Just control, precision, and commitment. The younger pilots started watching the mission footage frame by frame, analyzing every movement, every drift correction, every burst pattern. And my name? It didn't show up in the report. It wasn't broadcast across command channels. But the call sign was there, Valkyrie 6. And that was enough. 2 days later, I walked past the same roster board that had once crossed my name out in red. This time, a junior officer had drawn a small symbol next to my next assignment, barely noticeable. A pair of wings carved into a Valkyrie helmet. No graffiti, no slogans, just recognition in the language we all understood. That night, I visited the edge of the range, where we dumped spent casings and repaired battered skids. Wind pushed light fog across the grass. A quiet evening. Training flights far off in the distance. Someone had left a note folded between the 30mm casings. Taped shut. It read, "You held the sky open when the rest of us still feared it. You taught us to fly beneath the noise. You gave us the right to belong." No name. No signature. Just graphite handwriting pressed with conviction. I kept it in the same place I kept the others, in the back of my kneeboard, beside the silver coin that read "Hold fast." Back alive. More pilots came to me after that. Not with admiration, but with questions. Serious ones. Deep ones. About how to calm nerves mid-flight. How to hold targeting through wind shear. How to trust instinct without overcorrecting. And I answered them all. Not because I was trying to be a symbol, but because that's what someone should have done for me years ago. It wasn't mentorship. It was accountability. To the skies, to each other, to the ones who wouldn't make it home if we didn't get it exactly right. General Monroe tried again. He called me into his office a week after the Blackwater Gulch mission and laid a folder on his desk. Inside it was a formal nomination for the Distinguished Flying Cross. "I know you've turned this down before," he said, voice even. "But this time, it's not optional. You saved lives when no one else could even get off the ground. People deserve to know who made that possible." I closed the folder without looking at it. "Sir, with respect, they already know." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. No argument. No persuasion. Just a quiet understanding. I wasn't chasing medals. I never had. I didn't need parades or handshakes or televised interviews. I had the only reward that mattered. We brought them all back alive. The rest? The rest was noise. Instead, I kept flying. I stayed late to teach others. I drilled new co-pilots. I tuned aircraft with the same obsessive care I always had. And slowly, the next generation grew up inside a world where gender wasn't a barrier, only readiness was. You could hear it in how they spoke. She flew at Inouye through blackout fog with 0 radar. Her TDC marks are still etched in the simulator config. Burst 10. Shift 2. Breathe. Yeah, that's her rhythm. The myth lived on, but it had a face now. Mine. Sometimes I walk past the concrete barrier where someone carved the words that defined it all. Respect the ones who fly beneath the noise. They still bring brass casings there after training. Young pilots stop and run fingers over the groove. No plaque. No formal recognition. Just legacy and silence. And that's exactly how it should be. If you've ever been crossed off a roster, told you weren't ready, been laughed at for preparing harder than the rest, then this story is yours too. You don't need permission to rise. Just discipline, commitment, a refusal to break when it matters most. So the next time your moment comes, and it will come, fly like your hands hold the sky open for someone else. Fly with the steadiness that comes from quiet repetition, not ego. Let your actions speak the truth. Because when the world breaks apart and someone needs saving, the only thing that matters is who shows up.